What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? I've posted this before, and I need to say first off the bat that this is about my best friend, and she is the best person I know, i.e. not normally rich kid or anything. I was complaining about how I was short on money one month, just couldn't go out to eat because I had to pay rent and pay for tag renewal all in the same paycheck. She looked at me super seriously and was like, "Don't worry, they send you those in the mail for free." After a long discussion she learned that in fact, her mom had been paying for her new tags every year. I worked as a bouncer at a high-end nightclub. The biggest boner of a rich kid, straight out of Malibu's Most Wanted, gets a VIP booth and bottle service, racks up a massive bill trying to act like a baller. His credit card gets denied, and he has to call his dad to come down at 1:30 a.m. because he can't order any more bottles. His dad comes down in his pajamas, obviously ashamed and furious at this douche of a kid, ends up embarrassing the shit out of his kid in front of his whole group of friends. He takes the kid's keys and is about to leave when his kid makes some shitty comment and goes back in the club. The dad's about to walk away after he apologizes for his son. When we offer to drag him out the rough way, he smiles and accepts. That kid hit every door and step on the way out. Not the best story, but was one of the most satisfying experiences working at that club. Dunno if it qualifies as rich kid syndrome, but when I got out of the Navy I decided to use my GI Bill at one of the Penn State satellites. I was sitting in the cafeteria drinking coffee and typing up a paper when a girl sits down across from me and opens her backpack. She pulls out a sandwich bag and looks at it in disgust, then looks me dead in the eye and says, "I don't even know why I bother, my mother never cuts off the crust." I let out one of those high-pitched short laughs like, "Is this girl for real?" Oblivious to the tone of it, she says, "I know," right then asks me if I want it. I looked around thinking I was getting pranked or something cause this shit is too stereotypical to be real, and I just assumed I was being filmed. She shook it at me and gave me a well look. So I said duck it and took the sandwich. She then pulled out her student ID card and bought a crap ton of french fries. That sandwich was awesome. I think the bread was homemade and it was stacked like a dagwood. It had all kinds of expensive looking meats and Dijon mustard. Serious gourmet sheet. I know this girl's mother will never see this, but I just wanna say someone appreciated that sandwich. This case isn't too bad, and it's a bit funny. I became friends with a kid whose family was really well off. He was a really nice bloke, but a bit sheltered, and university was the first time he really had any independence, but he had very little sense of what the value of a dollar really was, since his folks got him what he usually wanted, compared to what normal people would spend. There was one particular time he wanted us to eat at a restaurant, and he assured us it's really good. So we all rocked up to this place and the price for main courses started at $40 to $60, which as poor uni students we couldn't afford, but when he realized this he was so embarrassed he got his folks to pay for it. He's finally wised up a few years later once he got more independence away from his family and made his own money, and remains one of the best blokes I know. In high school a kid was bragging that he got in his third fender bender in his old car, 3 years old, that his parents gave him but he hated, so his parents were buying him an entirely new, current year, car to incentivize him to drive better. I worked with this kid who was a good kid, but completely disconnected from financial reality for most people. He'd just moved out west from another state and was trying to get on like a normal adult. He went to buy a new car and was shocked that they couldn't just bill his dad for it since they didn't know him. He ordered a bottle of wine at a restaurant and the sommelier said, "Certainly, sir." Then the sommelier whispered, "Just for your knowledge, sir, the bottle is $700. He looked straight at him and asked, "Is that a lot?" The sommelier honestly didn't know how to answer. Good kid, and he got a lot better, but he just didn't know. Once he casually told his mom he needed some help with bills and she deposited $20,000 into his account. My friend's parents had a dilemma because they both bought each other new Mercedes for Valentine's Day. I worked at a Starbucks and we hired a new guy who I was training. At one point, I had to show him how to clean the restrooms. I grab the bleach and hand him a pair of gloves, and he looks at me in disgust and says, "We don't have a maid to clean the bathrooms?" He quit the next day lol. When I was in boarding school, one of my co-boarders handed me some mail saying, "Do you notice anything special about this envelope?" When I checked it out, I realized his face was on the stamp. He was royalty. Edit. I will add another too. Kid from Taiwan also attending same boarding school. My advent calendar had little chocolates. His had a remote control car, Sega Game Gear, etc etc. Another teenager, 16, arguing on the phone to his grandfather he didn't want a Porsche, he wanted the Ferrari. Went to a destination wedding in Mexico resort. Rich kids rented a golf cart, tore through the streets, and flipped the cart, injuring people and causing a huge commotion and traffic jam. A Mexican lady comes out and begins to scold them for their behavior. "You wouldn't act this way at home." Rich kid responds, "I promise you we do." It was the earnestness of his reply that got me. Edit. He really believed he was placating her with that response. There's gotta be a German word for something being funny, because the other party is aloof to their own behavior. My brother works at a rehab center for the kids of wealthy parents. He's always got stories, but the one that sticks with me the most was a kid who was in trouble with the law and doing rehab before his court appearances. You know, to look like a better person and hopefully the judge would go easier on him. He was mopey one day and my brother asks him what's wrong. The kid starts talking about how tough the whole experience has been for him, how it's been so hard on his family that his parents had to sell his house to pay for his rehab. My brother felt sympathetic and says, "Damn, that sucks that your parents had to sell their house over this," to which the kid corrected him, "No, they kept their house. They had to sell mine." Apostrophe. I knew a girl whose allowance was $90 a day. She got into trouble, so they cut it to $90 a week. One girl from my high school got breast implants for her 18th birthday. Her mom joined her as a mother-daughter bonding activity, followed by the daughter getting a brand new $90,000 Mercedes as a high school graduation gift. I work for a dentist and her son is a spoiled brat. He was at the office one day because she had to bring him to an appointment later that day. He got bored and went out wandering around some of the local shops. He came back a little while later and without any preamble walked up to her and said, "Give me $80 apostrophe." She asked him what it was for and he just repeated himself and she gave it to him. Edit. Did not expect this to blow up. I'll answer a few questions if I can. So the kid is 19 years old. He was 17 at the time of this incident. The father is in the picture but my boss, the dentist, is the main breadwinner and disciplinarian of the family. The husband is more like another child and just works here and there and lives off her money. She tries to act tough and instill certain morals and values in her kids, but then turns around and caves to all of their demands. For example, her twin daughters are going to university next year, and instead of staying in a dorm they demanded a 2-bedroom 2-bathroom apartment. They refused to share a bedroom or even a bathroom. At first she told them absolutely not, but they whined and complained and she caved. This will be a 2-bed 2-bath apartment in Toronto by the way, where rent prices are through the roof. My boss is very much about appearances, and from a young age, got her kids accustomed to a privileged lifestyle. She created monsters. Edit 2. Yes, they are totally like Jane Ralphio and Mona Lisa Saperstein. This is pretty tame, but it's what I got. I used to work as an after-school babysitter for a loaded doctor couple with 2 kids. My job was mainly to pick up the younger kid from school and hang out till his parents got home. He was a good kid, but coddled and immature. He was in 5th or 6th grade at this point. Oftentimes he would not be at his classroom when I came to get him, and the school campus was huge. Different buildings, courtyards, playgrounds, the works. If he wasn't at his classroom I had to comb the whole campus, and he was rarely in the same place twice. He had a cell phone, but usually ignored its existence except for playing games on it in the car. The school was in the city, and I had to park on the street. A couple of times I wound up with parking tickets because, despite having stuffed the meter with enough quarters to presumably result in ample time, the search for my charge would take much longer than anticipated. After a point, I mentioned this to him, calmly asking that he respect my time and stay in a set location so that I don't end up with a $25 ticket again. He looked at me with a good-natured shrug and said, well, that's not much. You can afford that. Sonny, your parents paid me $140 a week, and I was in college. I know you live in a $1.4 million house and your dad buys you an expensive new toy every Sunday, but with the money they're forking over for your education, someone ought to have taught you the value of a dollar by now. But honestly, he was a nice kid. They moved away, and I hope he's doing well. This kid back in high school was whining, I mean literally whimpering, that he had to wait something like 6 weeks for his custom-built BMW to come over from Germany. A friend of mine inherited a lot of money, enough to buy a house, and he spent it onto cars. A Subaru completely modded to Ken Block's version of it and some BMW, both extremely expensive. We asked him a few months later why he didn't buy a house with it, because he still lived with his parents. So he told us that he already owned a penthouse, he just didn't want to move yet. Knew this one guy at my college who didn't understand why everybody is so worked up about student loans. I remember him saying something along the lines of, why don't people just pay the tuition up front? He was also quite sheltered. I could absolutely survive on my own. My parents just pay for my food and house, but I pay for everything else. If I got a job I could pay for my food and house too. Said at 18. In the middle of a discussion between two middle-class peers who were talking about saving money because they had to pay for their own college and living expenses. About 5 minutes prior to this conversation, both peers had ordered the cheap dinner options and declined a shopping trip later that night, while rich girl was talking non-stop about buying the best, most expensive souvenirs for her friends. Once tried working a regular person retail job and quit within a couple weeks as it just wasn't right and I didn't like it. Read had actual responsibilities for the first time. Moved cross country for an 8-month education course where her parents pay food, rent, and school. They also gave her a debit card which replenishes up to $500 when it hits $50. She still posts Snapchats with captions of that broke person life over pictures of her getting Starbucks every day and insists she could survive on her own. Constantly suggests the most expensive options for meals, activities, etc. And tax on things, like we can just split the bill. I know you're saving but it's just amount at least $50. You'll be fine, right? Then gets upset when people can't afford to spend time with her or when someone dares to suggest that she helps cover costs. My fiance's cousin. He managed to crash 4 cars while still in high school because his father would replace them. When he moved on to college, he got kicked out of several apartments for owning a dog when they weren't permitted. He told me he didn't care though, since his father also funded his continuous stream of new housing. From what I last heard, his father is now paying for his long-standing cocaine habit. I wouldn't say rich kid, but definitely spoiled brat who thought he was rich. Befriended him in 5th grade over our interest in the UGR trading card game. First time I hung out at his place I noticed just how littered with stuff his room was. Some even unopened. I showed him some rare card that I had recently pulled from a pack. He got super jealous and angry that I wouldn't trade or sell it to him. He immediately got up and walked over to the family computer and booted up a site where you could buy cards and various other toys and such. Completely ignoring having me over, he's now on an online shopping spree adding stuff to the cart. After adding a few things he yells, "Where's the credit card?" And immediately his older sister comes running up the stairs to yell, "Kyle, mom said no more buying stuff online," and closes the website and shuts off the computer. Kyle then proceeds to have a crying tantrum on the floor, and I'm just standing there over him in shock at what's happening and how he's acting. I slowly stopped hanging out with him until completely avoiding him as his temperament got worse. Kid wasn't even rich either. If I remember correctly, both of his parents were cops. Have a teenage cousin who made fun of me because I can't drop 1k on Yeezys. Went to school with a crazy rich kid. His parents divorced and each decided to buy his love. Mommy owned a real estate agency, so she got him a license and spoon-fed him enough sales for a 6-figure income. The dad then bought him a magazine. Yes, the dad bought a magazine for his 24-year-old cokehead son to run. Worked about as well as you'd imagine.